Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant. I'm Graham Jesus Matthews, and here I analyze and I break down every single pay-per-view I watch in the WWE Network. Of course, the entire month of September for 2015 is dedicated to reviewing old Unforgiven events. So today we're breaking down the 2000 installment. Kicking off the show, an 8-man tag team match, right to censor, taking on the APA, the Acolytes Protection Agency, and the Dudley Boys. And the funny thing about this match, and as I talked about in my 1999 review of Backlash, there was a match between the APA the Acolytes and the Dudley Boys. And it was a fine match. It wasn't really too bad. Just the crowd didn't really care. The Dudley Boys had just come into the company. The APA was kind of really just coming into their own at that period in time. So neither team was all that over. That in addition to the fact they didn't really make the best of opponents. I mean, their match, like I said, was decent, but it wasn't really all that good or as good as I expected it to be. They just didn't have the chemistry. It was a little bit better here. This was not a great match by any stretch, but it was a fine little opener. The right to censor picking up the win. And that was about it. So the Dudley Boys and the APA having better chemistry, not too great chemistry, but better chemistry as partners than they did opponents. But still, that did not make this match really all that much different. It was a decent outing, nothing too spectacular, but a kind of a fine way of opening up the show. After that, we had Taz versus Jerry Lawler in a strap match, kind of going off of the match they had at SummerSlam only a month prior to this. It was a fine match. I mean, it was fun for what it was, and the strap match I've never really been fond of, but between two Taz was still a wrestler at this period in time, and Jerry Lawler wrestled sporadically, over the course of the late 90s and early 2000s. The match was fine, but the biggest takeaway from this thing was the debut of Raven, which people popped for. I thought the commentators made a pretty big deal of it. I thought they would make a bigger deal of it, and then saying, this is his premier appearance in WWE. They basically just said why he showed up, like, oh, what is he doing here? I mean, it was cool, and they didn't really make it, clear until later on in the broadcast that he was not a member of their active roster. So I did have to look up right after I saw it, like, was this his debut in WWE, or was he making a return, or was he just getting involved? I wasn't really sure, so I did have to look that up, and it did turn out that was his premier appearance in WWE. So that's pretty cool and a memorable debut for Raven in the WWF at that period in time, and no better way to debut than helping out a former ECW ally, or an alum rather, Taz, to defeat Jerry Lawler. So the match was what it was, but the biggest takeaway, as I mentioned, was the debut of Raven, which made for a pretty cool moment on this show. So after that, a Hardcore Open Invitational for the Hardcore Championship. And I've talked about here on WrestleRant before in the past when I was reviewing old WrestleManias and a lot of other pay-per-views from the late 90s and early 2000s. I was a sucker for the Hardcore Championship. I thought it was a cool stipulation. The whole 24/7 rule made for some really fun champions and matches and moments and whatever else. This was this wasn't really all that included. I mean, I wouldn't call this a very fun match. I mean, it was decent while it opened. We had the combatants included Funaki, Al Snow, Test, Perry Saturn, Crash Holly, and Steve Blackman, who walked out as the champion in the end. The title changed hands at various points in the contest. I mean, it was decent while it lasted. It wasn't too anything exciting. It wasn't as good as some other past Hardcore Invitationals that I've seen on these pay-per-views. It started out well, then it just kind of transcended into total chaos by the end, which is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing, and it was a good thing later on in the show with the multi-man match that we got in the main event. But in this case, though, I thought it was more of a train wreck and a mess than it was like a masterpiece, so to speak. It wasn't too terrible, but I've seen better hardcore matches in the past over that championship. But still, as I mentioned, Steve Blackman walking out as still the hardcore champion, or the new hardcore champion, rather. I think Crash Holly walked in with the title. After that, we had Chris Jericho versus X-Pac in a rematch from the year prior at Unforgiven. So I already talked about the APA and the Dudley Boys teaming up 1 year removed from facing off at Unforgiven in 1999. And this was an exact rematch from Unforgiven 1999, Chris Jericho versus X-Pac, so they were still feuding a year later. A really good match, much like their Unforgiven match from a year prior. It was pretty good. I mean, both guys had very good chemistry with one another. I wouldn't rank X-Pac as one of Jericho's all-time greatest opponents, but when they were put together, they did have decent matches. This was one of them. I would probably say I enjoyed this match more than I did the match from Unforgiven the year prior, because Jericho had more underneath his belt, and he had more experience, and people were more attached to his character, whatnot. X-Pac, kind of the same thing. So I enjoyed this match a little bit more. The crowd was a lot better for it because that North Carolina crowd and Unforgiven 99 was atrocious, like I talked about in that review. But another really good match from the two, and Jericho ended up winning in the end. So good stuff from both guys. After that, in my personal opinion, the match of the night, the Hardy Boys taking on Edge and Christian, who were the then World Tag Team Champions, in a steel cage match. Now, of course, this is 1 month removed from the first ever TLC ladder match, not including the one at WrestleMania 16. That was a three-way ladder match, but that was the first official TLC tag team title match ever in WWE history at SummerSlam 2000. So 1 month later at Unforgiven, we get the two teams of those three teams, the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian, facing off in a steel cage match for those tag team titles. And an excellent match. These guys, these two teams have had a million matches over the course of this period of time, from 99 to 2001, 2002, but dare I say this was one of their best outings against each other. I thought it was a very, very good match. They told an excellent story. At one point, Edge and Christian just shoved Jeff Hardy over the top of the cage, just isolating Matt and trying to just beat him down and try to get him, cornered in so they could beat him. I think Christian ended up going over the cage, so it was just Edge and Matt Hardy left, and they were going at it in the cage. Jeff Hardy ended up coming back in, and he did his Whisper in the Wind, I believe it's called. Or I think it's called the Whisper in the Wind. Yeah, it was a Whisper in the Wind when he jumps off the back of the cage, like backwards. When he jumps off the cage backwards. And he did that on top of Matt and Edge, I want to say, in the middle of the ring. And then Lita got involved. She jumped up the side of the steel cage and did her Hurricane Rana to Christian, I think it was, on the side of the cage. So it was a great match. The in-ring action was excellent. The story was very solid. I thought it was a very enjoyable contest. And these guys just have amazing chemistry together. So that really comes as no surprise given who was involved. But the steel cage match, for once, I've talked about steel cage matches in the past, and I've kind of ranted on and on about it. How they're supposed to. Their intent is supposed to prevent interference. That's the whole point of a steel cage match. That's why it was created within pro wrestling. We did get some interference from Lita here, but it was on the outside. She never got inside the ring, from what I can recall, anyway. So I thought this match kind of lived up to the stipulation. There was no interference, no bullshit, no bullshit on the outside. Other than Lita, which that one, with the exception of that one fun spot, I thought this was a great match. Everyone, put forth a strong effort and produced an excellent contest. And, one that I think it gets enough credit, but I think a lot of people definitely look at the TLC matches from SummerSlam and WrestleMania, and they don't look at this match as one of the better bouts that these two teams had between the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian. So a great match between the two teams, and in the end, it was the Hardy Boys emerging victorious to a major pop to become the new WWF Tag Team Champions. So after that, for the Intercontinental Championship, we had Eddie Guerrero defending the gold against Rikishi. And the whole story behind this was not really about Rikishi. It was more so about Eddie in China and Eddie abusing China after she was posing for Playboy and whatever else, and Eddie was kind of the abusive boyfriend role. He was in that kind of role going into this feud. But it was weird, too, because Rikishi kind of showed shades of a heel turn. He would ultimately go heel later on that year when he was revealed as the person behind the Stone Cold Steve Austin attack, which I'll talk about in a second as well. So maybe they were just kind of planting the seeds for that here. He attacked Shine after the match, whereas Eddie was supposed to be the heel. It was kind of confusing. The match was good. Not very much of a classic. It was kind of slow, nothing too memorable. It was okay. It wasn't anything too great. But both guys held up their own. Eddie Guerrero got a really good match. Has gotten really good matches out of the worst of opponents, and Rikishi was no different. It's not that he was a bad worker. Just as a single star, he was not known for his in-ring ability. He was known for his charisma and connection with the crowd, but he wasn't known for having 5-star mat classics, So it was a fine match. It was more about the story they were telling than the title or Rikishi winning it or the match itself even. It was kind of more so about China taking a bullet for Eddie and getting Rikishi disqualified and helping Eddie retain his Intercontinental Championship. So it furthered the feud. It told a good story. The match wasn't anything to write home about, but at least the story was told effectively. So after that, I don't know if it was after that or if it was before this or whatever, but on this show we had a segment with the return of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And by the way, speaking of segments, I do have to mention this. Mick Foley, who was the commissioner at that time, was all over this show, and he is so awesome. I remember watching his documentary on the WWE Network, or at least initially I watched it online a few years ago, and I just recently watched it back on the WWE Network, and I love it so much. He goes into great detail about his time as commissioner, how much he loved it, why it was cut short, and why it didn't deserve to be cut short. But in that role, he was so hilarious. I thought he was great all over the show in the segments he had with Triple H and Kurt Angle. And Kurt Angle said, when I won the Olympic gold medal back in 1996, I won it with a broken neck. And Mick Foley's like, yep. And then Kurt Angle says, I also won it with IBS. And Kurt Angle says, UBS? And they're like, no, what? But it was great. It was pretty funny. He said, I don't care if you had diarrhea, Kurt. I don't care if you have diarrhea of the mouth. You're going to go out there and face Triple H. And then Triple H comes over later on to Mick Foley's makeshift office. He says, oh, God, what was it? I don't know if it was Foley or Triple H. I think Triple H started. He goes, you know, Mick, you and I have had many wars over the years. And no, Foley says that. Foley goes, yeah, you and I have had our fair share of wars over the years. And then Triple H says, yep, and I won most of them. And then Foley goes, not all of them. And then Triple H goes, no, not all of them. And it was a great encounter. It was a great little bit between Angle, Triple H, and Foley throughout the show. I just wanted to mention that. I thought there was a kind of a hidden gem on this show. Mick Foley is the commissioner. He was so awesome in that role. And he also served as the special guest referee for the next match, and I'll talk about that in a second. But getting back to what I was originally saying, though, the segment with Stone Cold Steve Austin, he was coming back after a near 10-month layoff after being attacked. In reality, he had to take time off for neck surgery. But after being attacked at Survivor Series 1999, after being hit with a car, and now he was back and Unforgiven. And Shane McMahon comes down. He was about to reveal his attacker, and he revealed it to be Shane McMahon. After he was revealing it to be Steve Blackman after showing footage of Blackman hitting Ken Shamrock with a car a year earlier or something like that, saying he had history with motor vehicle violence or whatever it was. And later they clarified on commentary that Shane was only doing that just so he can get revenge from Steve Blackman knocking him off the Titantron during their match at SummerSlam. So kind of a great touch there and kind of tying the two storylines together. Out comes Stone Cold Steve Austin. Doesn't say a single word throughout the entire segment. The guy's over like a motherfucker. Debuting his new theme song by Disturbed, which I always thought was my favorite. That's always been my favorite version of his theme song, the Disturbed version with the lyrics that he used for a time in 2000 and 2001. So he comes out. He looks both guys in the eyes, both Shane McMahon and Steve Blackman. He looks at Shane. He looks at Steve. He stuns Steve, and he flies out of the ring, and he celebrates with Shane McMahon. Shane McMahon is all ecstatic, and he's all over the top, and it's pretty funny. Shane McMahon is always awesome. He's always been great. Whether he was wrestling or as a character, whatever, he was awesome. So anyway, he's celebrating with Stone Cold, and they're just going crazy. The crowd's going crazy. He lays him out, and he locks eyes with him first, and Shane McMahon's like has that oh shit look on his face. It was priceless. Lays him out with a stunner and continues to lay him out with two subsequent more stunners before celebrating with the crowd once again for like a full 5-10 minute segment. It was the most entertaining segment without a Stone Cold promo that you will ever see. I thought it was awesome and a grand return for Stone Cold. They didn't give away the attacker right away, and Austin was able to exact some revenge on Shane McMahon. So a very entertaining segment all around, and an effective use of time to kind of kill it before getting to the next match. So our second to last match on the show, Triple H versus Kurt Angle, in a no disqualification match with Mick Foley as the special guest referee. Not as good as I thought it was going to be. It was a solid match, but it just wasn't as exciting as I originally anticipated. It was slow and, more often than not throughout the match. And they've had really good matches in the past. They had some decent chemistry. But this match didn't really do it for me all too much. I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't anything... easily not one of their better matches that they've ever had. But the storyline, though, with Stephanie and Kurt Angle breaking the arm of Triple H and Kurt Angle just kind of making a move on Stephanie and Stephanie not knowing which side to choose, it was great. I thought it was a very well-told story, and I'm not typically a huge fan of love triangles in wrestling because they're not always very well told. But this one was. I thought it was a very entertaining storyline, and Stephanie was at ringside throughout the match, and it did kind of lead up to her making her final choice, and in the end, she would low blow Kurt or attack him or whatever, leading to Triple H picking up the win and emerging victorious. So the match itself was not as great as I thought it was going to be. The no disqualification stipulation, I mean, didn't really serve that much of a purpose. It just kind of built the bridge to the finish with Triple H being able to use his own sledgehammer, but that was about it. Other than that, though, this match wasn't really all that it was cracked up to be. Not to say it was bad, it was solid, just not as great or as classic as I figured it would. But again, not to say it was bad. I enjoyed it for what it was, solid. Just a bit boring and more often than not, because not really much went on, which was the exception. I mean, the exact opposite with the main event, the Fatal 4-Way match for the WWF Championship with The Rock defending against Chris Benoit, The Undertaker, and Kane. Much like the six-pack challenge from a year prior, Not a single dull moment throughout the entire match. And I love these kind of matches because they can either really, or I'm kind of skeptical about multi-man matches. Because like I said in my Unforgiven 99 review, multi-man matches can be very hit or miss. They can be a total clusterfuck of a match, or they can be just pure pandemonium and awesomeness. And this definitely fell in the latter category. I thought these guys, all four of them, put forth an awesome effort. All of them were on their A game. I mean, it also kind of fell in the formulaic in the formulaic category. It was kind of formulaic at certain points. And I say that because, someone hits their finisher, they get the cover, someone, breaks it up. And that kept on happening at various points. So if you're not a fan of that kind of thing, then I could see why you wouldn't like this match. But other than that, though, it was your typical Fatal 4-Way. Very, very fun. All four guys were, like I said, on their A game. Not a single dull moment throughout the entire match. And at one point, Chris Benoit had won the WWF Championship, but the referee did not see, or Mick Foley, he came out and he saw that Undertaker's foot was on the rope or something like that. So the match resumes and all four guys continue to go at it. And in the end, it's The Rock picking up the win after pinning Chris Benoit to retain his WWF Championship. Undertaker was about to break it up and Kane kind of stops him, which was a little weird. You would think you would want Undertaker to break it up so you would have a chance at winning the title. So I don't know what the point of that was. But still, it was a very good match. I enjoyed it. A match I never knew about before watching this pay-per-view. I knew a lot about, some of the matches that took place in 2000 between The Rock and Triple H and their long series of matches. But after that point, though, it was, I didn't really know much about what happened in the remainder of 2000. So it was kind of cool to see this match for the very first time. And all four guys, like I said, all four guys played their roles to perfection. A very, very fun main event with The Rock coming out on top, still the WWF champion. So on the whole, probably the best No Mercy yet. I thought that 98 edition was very lackluster, very few good matches on that show. The 99 show, a dead crowd, but it still had its, highlights and low points, and I thought it was a pretty good show. It was good, not great, but it was pretty good for what it was. It had some pretty good matches. This show, while not amazing, was definitely better than its two predecessors. I thought it was the best installment of the three up to this point. And you had some really good matches. You had the debut of Raven in the second match between Taz and Jerry Lawler. You had a decent Hardcore Open, a few other decent matches, X-Pac and Jericho. Pretty good match from those two. An excellent match from the tag team title guys from the tag team boys, the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian inside the steel cage. Like I said, my personal match of the night. Eddie and Rikishi having the match wasn't really anything to write home about, as I mentioned earlier, but it did further the story between Eddie and Chyna. Triple H and Kurt Angle, kind of a disappointment, kind of underwhelming, but still a good match for what it was. And the main event was very entertaining. So, not an amazing show, but a good to great show. A good to very good show. Better than last year, which is saying something. I thought the 99 show was good to pretty good. This one, I would solidly say, was pretty good. Had some very good matches. For the main event and the tag team title match alone, but the undercard is not too bad either, making it, rounding it out as a very enjoyable show, to say the least. So that's going to do it for my review of Unforgiven 2000. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and my review of it. And of course, I'll be back on Tuesday, hopefully, with my review of Unforgiven 2001. But in the meantime and in between time, you guys can catch me on Facebook at facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews. You can follow me on Twitter at WrestleRant, and be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. All support is greatly appreciated. So guys, enjoy your Labor Day weekend. I'll be back tomorrow with hashtag AskGSM, hopefully, on the Labor Day holiday. But until then, and until next time, enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch you guys down the road.